Hi, welcome to Amoi Unplugged Exploring Diversity, and I'm Chioma Ikejiani. With the current trends in the oil sector, Nigeria is naturally turning away from oil and is exploring agriculture, industrialization, and manufacturing. MD of Nepza, Emmanuel Jime, is talking to us about how he's collaborating to bring in foreign direct investment, and more importantly, how he's collaborating with his sister agency to make sure that he is in step with the Buhari-led administration team in driving the diversification of Nigeria's economy. Stay tuned, don't touch that dial, we'll be right back. What exactly is this free trade zone scheme? Because when I heard about it, I really didn't quite understand what it was and how it fit into the whole concept of economic diversification.
Okay, so let's first make the point that before now, the economy of Nigeria was a mono economy, so to speak. I mean, we were totally dependent on oil. And the whole of our economic life was tied around oil. Now, anybody you don't need rocket science, to establish the fact that oil is an exhaustible commodity. And apart from that fact, economically, if you're dependent on only one source of revenue, I believe it stands to reason that if there's anything that affects, that source, now, clearly, that will also dislocate economic activity in the nation. So, because we had started suffering some of the vagaries and the variations that come, with the oil markets, it then meant that there was a need for Nigeria to consciously develop a requirement to move away from oil and to begin to focus on other areas of economic activity. So that's really where the concept of diversification of our economy came into focus. In 1992, the military regime of the time established this agency, the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority, whose mandate essentially, was to move Nigeria away from being a mono economy, into the creation of economic hubs that would then lead to manufacturing, industrialization, and especially because there was a need for us to develop the agricultural sector in order for us to be able to be an exporting nation as well. So the free zone scheme, which really is what we describe, the concept of diversification diversification that the country went into, is directly anchored by this particular agency. So in that capacity, what we do here in this agency is to serve both as regulator and as operator as well. So that essentially is really what the concept of the free zone schemes really is about.
What is your vision?
Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is you walk into an agency and you have to understand what's this agency about. What is the mandate of the agency? My clear understanding of our mandate is that we're supposed to aid Nigeria's movement away from oil in order for us to develop economic activities, that do not necessarily have a direct bearing on oil. And in doing that, one of the tools that are available to us is to be able to attract foreign direct investment in other areas of the economy. For instance, whether it is in textile manufacturing, whether it is in other forms of fabrications. And then today in current trends, there's also the services industry, that really has taken, a big hold. Therefore, you're thinking Microsoft, you're thinking, most of these outfits, that are actually offering services that do not have direct bearing on, oil, the oil structure.
Non-oil sector.
Yeah, so my vision to respond to that question, was to see in what ways do we then ensure that this agency is responding, to that economic requirement of our times. If our desire is to move away from oil, then it means that we must create an environment that makes it attractive enough for someone from outside that may decide that Nigeria is their preferred destination for investment. And so in that capacity, we have now developed a vision around that concept, which is first and foremost to prepare the grounds in our country in a way that makes it attractive enough for foreign direct investment flow into economic space. So that, I think, is the broader vision, and we now have to develop a sense in which we're able to achieve, that objective.
How pivotal is Nepza to the president's actualization of diversifying the economy? How pivotal?
Okay, so first let me make the point earlier on that the desire of this present administration, as anchored by President Buhari, is, as I said, to diversify and then to make sure, that we have put in place, processes that can attract foreign direct investment into our territory. And in doing that, I think it's clear to me that the president understands that we have to, enable the environment. And by enabling the environment means that government must take seriously the requirement that you need to put in place so that a hub can properly be described as a world-class economic hub. Because nobody wants to go into a territory where the circumstances that could lead for them to then be able to do their businesses are not present. And one of the things that have become very, very key to the delivery on that mandate is Nigeria suffers infrastructure deficit. The sort of infrastructure deficit that makes it very, very difficult for businesses to be able to operate at optimum.
What are some of the infrastructural deficits that
So we're talking, for instance, power.
Okay.
We're talking water. We're talking even as simple as road networks. We're talking, the skilled labor that is requisite, for companies to be able to, engage, the sort of labor skills that are required. Now, I mentioned power most importantly, because there is simply no way that you are able to achieve any level of industrialization until, of course, you have sorted out, power as a minimum key requirement. Now, because we suffer that sort of deficit nationwide, the focus has been we want to kickstart our industrial development, therefore create an enclave and put in all of the kinds of infrastructure that you may not find anywhere else in the country.
Interesting.
So therefore, we have a situation where if you go, for instance, to one of our free zones, the premier free zone in this country is Calabar Free Zone. Now, what we've done there now is to make sure that power supply is at the level, cleanly supplied in a way that companies... Uninterrupted. We, of course, with textile manufacturing, water is one of the key components in any factory that delivers on textiles. So we're ensuring that we have water supply in free zones in a way that you can't find anywhere else in the country. So that is the first thing that Mr. President has instructed that we should do, and credit be given to him. For the first time since the history of this agency, the capital inflow that has been dedicated, to Nepza in order to provide these kinds of infrastructure that we're talking about is been more than quadrupled in a way that has never happened before.
The capital
the
that
most
has
that
been
we've
released?
ever had before I came here in April 2017 was about 2 billion. That was the total capital allocation that were given to this agency, to perform such a wonderful, important function for the country. But in 2017 alone, Mr. President decided a capital injection of close to 50 billion. That's more than we could ever have dreamed of.
Wow.
And we have a replication of that same amount in 2018. So in 2 years alone, this agency has been given 100 billion. And that,
wow,
in my understanding, is a clear demonstration of the willingness of Mr. President, to ensure that we are injecting the right sort of infrastructural development that can lead to the fulfillment of that mandate.
So tell me, so I'm back to April 19th, it's day one. What were some of the things that you did in order to get acquainted with what was happening in your agency? What are some of the activities, some updated activities to date that you can speak to us about?
Okay, so the first thing I did when I got into office, first 1 week, was of course to try to understudy the environment in which I was going to be working. This was really the first exposure I was going to have with the executive branch. Keep in mind,
had you heard of free zones before your appointment?
No. Keep in mind, I was actually always in the legislative arm of government. I never really had any exposures with the executive branch. And before I came here, I actually didn't even know what Nepza was. So I got in here, and of course, with all due modesty, the fact that one is a trained lawyer means that you're also able to then be versatile. So that allowed me to take just a week or two to understudy, the institution and to be able to come to grasp, with what actually we were meant to do. Of course, the next thing I did after that was to now tour all of our zones spread all over the country. And I did that, I think, in about 2 weeks. I was able to visit every single zone in this country, and I then was able to interact first with the zone management, and then of course with the stakeholders. I mean, those who are investing in the zones. And I also have to mention that there is need for us to have good interagency relationships, with other agencies of government that help us to be able to deliver on the mandate. So all of those were going on simultaneously, and I can say that those visits opened my eyes in a way that 4 years of a university education probably would not have given me. So I'm able to now speak with some sense of authority about what the issues are, the challenges that we have, because I was able to learn from those I was engaging with and interacting with. And if you like, I can move forward to tell you what I believe the challenges have been and why it is that maybe we haven't really delivered on the free zones that are world-class free zones in a way, that we would be comfortable with. One of the things that...
what are the challenges?
Precisely. So some of the challenges, one of which, like I said earlier, infrastructure deficit. I mean, that has been one of the key challenges that we've had. And like I said, the addressing of that particular area of the challenge, which the federal government has taken on board, is salutary. But I also would need to make this point. Government alone can't do it. Government can't do it alone.
What do you mean by that?
What that means is that, yes, government can't do it alone because the resources that are available to government are simply insufficient as to be able to focus only on one area of economic life. There are other areas of engagement. You have the rail lines, you have the airports, you have the seaports, you have civil service structures and all of that. These are enormous responsibilities that the government has. So one of the things that we've taken on board as part of how we work around the challenges that we are facing is to engage in private partnerships, because the recognition is that if the private sector is encouraged to come into our zones, some of those very important anchor investors actually also have the capacity.
The technology.
Not the technology, the capacity, most especially, to be able to put down their resources in order to get some of that infrastructural deficit, augmented. So we are working together in partnerships in addition to the fact that government has also taken the bull by the horn in making sure that sufficient enough resources are given, given to us. So those are some of the challenges. Obviously, infrastructure, interagency relationships. Sometimes there's a clear misunderstanding, I believe, as to what is it that the free zone scheme is actually meant, to be. I give you an example of the problem that we had earlier on when I came with the customs. The customs believes that their responsibility is to raise revenues immediately. The concept of a free zone is to de-emphasize taxes and levies, because
on
that's
the companies that are coming in.
Yes, because that's the only way that you can attract foreign companies to come.
As an incentive.
Now, you look at the larger picture. When a company has then moved into a zone, are you talking about the benefits that come, the employment possibilities that exist for Nigerians, transfer of technology, foreign direct investment, in dollars and all kinds of foreign currencies. These are the benefits, that come into a free zone. Now, this is long term, of course. You can't obviously get all of the benefits at one fell swoop. I'm happy to say that when I came here, after touring and getting those engagements going, one of the things I did was to have an engagement with my colleague counterpart, the Controller General of the Customs, Hamid Ali, who, when we spoke, I believe understood where we're coming from. And because of his understanding, I'm happy to say today that the relationship that we have with the customs, for example, is one of the best ever.
Wow.
So that means that we now are having an environment in which free zones are better able, to, operate without too much interference, from the customs, for example. Of course, the immigration department is very, very important to us as well. When you want to do passports, visas for foreigners who are coming into, so one of the incentives that we have is that a company is free to bring even 100% of their staff as foreigners.
Wow.
It's part of the incentives that are given in our free zones. But to be able to do that, you're going to have immigrations to provide visas, for those individuals to be able to come in. So again, there has to be that sort of synergy, between us and the immigrations. What we do is that in our free zones, we run what is called a one-stop shop. By that, it means simply bring your bag into our free zone, get registered, and then we can take over from there. So your relationship with customs is handled by us. Your relationship with the immigrations is handled by us. Whatever other agency of government that you may need, in order for you to be able to perform, that becomes the responsibility of Nepza, to serve as an intermediary and to be able, to assist you get all the other licenses that you may need. So that precisely is one, I think, of the attractions that foreign companies have, because
So,
then
let me just walk me through this. If company A is very interested in participating in the free zone scheme in Nigeria, what is the first process that they have to go through, and what is the ease of that process in terms of ease of doing business?
Okay, so the first thing is that everyone has to know there are two platforms on which you can get into a free zone. First, like I said, you have to own a zone, in which case you then will be given a license. You apply to Nepza. Nepza starts the processes, and we take it up to the Mr. President, who is the only authority in this country that can declare a zone open. Keep in mind, once a zone has been declared free, now that zone actually has been elevated really and been given a character of a nation within a nation. That's pretty much like the country is ceding its territory. And of course, only Mr. President, under our laws, can do that. So that's the reason why, if you're going to have a zone, Mr. President is the final authority, that will give his approval, for the zone to be created. Now,
once I get the license,
on our side of the processing, we can do this in 24 hours, 48 hours maximum.
Okay.
But once it gets out of here and it is taken to the minister, because the minister supervises, this agency, and then of course he then takes it over to Mr. President. We have tried so much, given the environment that has been created recently, because of the ease of doing business policy of this present administration to ensure that even that process doesn't take long anymore. So as soon as it gets to the president's table, usually there is a minimum, I believe, of about 30 days, and then we're able to get it out for you.
Wow.
So that's the longest it can take most of the time, from anywhere between 2 weeks to about a month, maximum, for that process to conclude. The second platform, is to get into a zone that has already been established. And therefore, you are not a zone owner, but you are just an enterprise that is registered in that particular zone. It's faster, obviously, it's quicker. You don't need any approvals actually coming from anywhere. Once the zone brings up that proposal before us here at Nepza, automatically, we're able to give you that approval. So I think it's a matter of choice, what actually platform you may decide, to use. Of course, very important companies that are interested in the Nigerian environment, for the most part, would like to own their own zone. That's understandable, and we actually even encourage that as well. Remember also that when you own a zone, it means that you have a lot of leverage in terms of how that particular zone is being run. If you are an enterprise in a zone, then of course you have to submit yourself, to whoever it is that is the general
of course,
owner,
the owner.
Of that particular zone. So those are the two platforms on which. And let me also mention this for the benefit of those who may be interested in hearing me. The license fee for the zone, comes to about $400,000 US. That is when you want to own a zone by yourself. And I'm sure that if Microsoft were to come in here and seek to have a zone, that probably would go down as peanuts. But because we are also interested in ensuring that there's even more of these kinds of interventions or involvements coming into our zones, we now have started a process of a tariff review, so that we can accommodate as many as may want, to come into the Nigerian operation space, so that we do not dissuade or discourage, individuals who may have an interest in coming into the zones.
Is there a difference between a private and a public zone? Can you just, for the sake of explaining?
Okay, so
privately owned zones and publicly owned zones.
So
does it really matter?
Well, it doesn't really matter, frankly, at the end of the day. But what's happened is that public zones, as the name depicts, are owned publicly. I mean, they're owned by the federal government of Nigeria. As a matter of fact, we have, at the present time, only 2 of those kinds of zones out of the 37 or so zones that we have in the country. That's Calabar Free Trade Zone and Kano Free Trade Zone. These are public-owned free zones. The other 35 zones that I just mentioned are actually privately owned. Privately owned in the sense that there are cases where there are partnerships between state governments and individuals, or other individuals actually may decide on their own, to have their own private zones. Now, we regulate and control and operate the public zones directly here from Nepza as a government-owned enterprise. The private zones are not owned, obviously, by Nepza. So what we do is just to provide the regulatory framework for those private zones, to be able, to carry on their businesses. Now, I think it only makes economic sense for people who may decide that, as between publicly owned enclaves and privately owned enclaves. It's left to be imagined, usually, which ones would be better run in terms of efficacy, efficiency, and the like. But that really basically is about all that I can see is differentials between publicly owned and privately owned companies.
Let me ask you a question. There's so many big multinational companies like Microsoft, Amazon, so many big companies, Yahoo, and they're looking at India. Why would they come to Nigeria? What is great about Nigeria in terms of that free zone space and opportunity?
Without meaning to be immodest, let me tell you that this is the gateway to Africa. If you want to do business on a continent and you're a global player and you do not have a presence in Nigeria, then you haven't started. We have a population that is going on 200 million in the short while. Now, you tell me, isn't that the kind of population that
we've got the numbers?
So we got the numbers. We're strategic in terms of our location. You know very well that from Nigeria, it's quite easy, much easier to get to the capitals of the Western world. So the strategic location of Nigeria enables, you know, our place in order for people to make that decision. On top of it, we, I believe, are offering some of the best incentives ever that you can get to be able to invest and do your business.
I can't believe you can't pay your taxes.
You, for instance, okay, so you can own your business 100%. Okay, you don't need a Nigerian partner if you're in our free zones. You can do repatriation of your profits 100%. Okay, if you're importing raw materials into any of our free zones, it's zero rated taxes. When you're exporting outside of Nigeria, it's zero rated taxes. So pretty much everything is free, really, like they say. The only real advantage that is coming to our country is that you're giving jobs to Nigerians.
Yeah. And you're transferring technology.
You're also transferring technology.
Yeah.
You know? So these are the things that make us, you know, who we are. But like I said, that population is something that I believe that anybody who is serious in doing business has to keep in mind, you know, because the market is really there for you. You know, so I quite seriously believe and think that, you know, this is the place to be.